Lahasi at the loud mouth?
Yeah.
Okay, go get him.
If you just happened to look out your window late one night, you noticed a man breaking into your home and he had a .357 Magnum, what would you do? Would you let that slime ball walk right in and take everything you own and endanger the life of your entire family? Hell no. But that's exactly what some members of Congress are doing by allowing the Soviets to spread their communist crap to our Central American borders and threaten the very freedom that is the foundation of our country. Long live freedom, liberty for the Contras! Next! Good evening, everybody. In just very few short days, an extremely important vote is going to be coming up before our frightened congressman in Washington, D.C. If you're watching this tonight, you cowards, pay attention to what the American people have to say. At home base with me tonight is Larry Burns, who is the director of the Council of Hemispheric Affairs. Good evening, Larry. How are you?
Good evening, Morton.
You know, I don't scare very easily, but I'm damn concerned about the commie threat to our way of life. Are you going to tell us tonight that the Soviet buildup in Nicaragua isn't serious and that there's no threat to democracy in Central America or our own freedom?
Pretty much so, yeah. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Could I go on a bit?
Sure, absolutely.
Well, you know, obviously the Soviets are trying to prove themselves as a credible ally, not just in Nicaragua, but around the world, in the same way that the United States attempts to prove itself as a credible ally in 50 or 60 countries where the United States is involved. But I think Gorbachev, on his visit to Washington a few weeks ago, said it all very plainly. We will pull out all of our aid. That is, the White House has been saying for several years that there are 2,000 Soviet advisors in Cuba, in Nicaragua, 8,000 Cuban advisors. This defector, this Roger Miranda, the other day said that when asked how many advisors are there, he said there are 12 Soviet advisors, and there are 500 Cuban advisors, precisely what the Sandinistas have been saying all along, and precisely the opposite of all of these prevarications that have been coming out of the White House for years. The problem here is the administration has no credibility on this issue. It lies as a way of life on this question.
Are you telling me then that the Soviet Union, which is already in economic difficulty, is going to walk away from their $4 billion investment in the 1980s in the Cuban-Nicaraguan area?
Well, look, you know that they've been desperate for Cuba to normalize relations with the United States over the years precisely because they can't afford that ongoing economic investment. And they've already told the Nicaraguans, about 5 months ago or so, that we're going to have to cut back on oil shipments, and you've got to become more economically efficient because we can't carry it any longer. That is, the Soviets want to pull out. They want to pull out because Central America is marginal to their interests. They are interested in Middle Europe, and they're interested in their relations with China. They got into Central America because they had to prove they were credible allies.
You really believe, then, that if we cut off all assistance down there, they'll instantly cut off
I certainly do. I certainly do.
You believe that?
I do.
That's an
I may be a pablum puker, but I really do.
No, I don't think you're as much a pablum puker as maybe you're naive, all right? Because, you know, I look at Afghanistan, I look at all these other areas, I don't see the Soviet Union walking away from $4 billion of investment.
Well, don't think in such messianic terms, because right now, the Soviet Union has other fish to fry, and it's very clear that they want to pull out of Afghanistan. That has been their Vietnam. But one of the things that you should remember is that we're not dealing with a lucid perception of a problem. Certainly the U.S. has bona fide security interests in Central America. But what you're looking at right now is a war that has been so personalized that it's Mr. Reagan's war, just like Vietnam was Mr. Johnson's. And there's no logic at work here. There's presidential obsession at work.
I think there's presidential heroics for America, for the protection of America. Let me go to Ernesto Palacio, who is the Washington representative for the Nicaraguan resistance. Mr. Palacio, as a leader of the Contra rebel force, do you think that we should be concerned with the Soviet in your country?
I think you should be extremely concerned. I like to go back on the date that Mr. Burns mentioned. He said that 5 months ago, I must remind him, the Central American Treaty was signed by the Central Americans. The object of that treaty was to have democracy in Nicaragua. After the treaty was signed, the defector that Mr. Burns mentions was saying that the Nicaraguans, the Sandinistas, had come to an agreement with the Soviets for an unprecedented arms race in Nicaragua, planning to install a 600,000-man army in the country in spite of the treaty. So that gives you an idea as to the intentions of the Sandinistas. They are self-avowed Marxists. They themselves have said so.
What does the fanatic Daniel Ortega hope to gain by aligning with the Soviets against the United States?
Well, these people are messianic. That is the problem with them. They see themselves as the inheritors of Fidel Castro. They will have to continue his struggle in Latin America. Not only that, the official anthem of the Sandinistas says that they fight against the gringos, who are the enemies of humanity.
There is a misstatement made here.
Wait a second, sir. We'll have you up at the loudmouth in just a second. Oh, that's when you get up to the loudmouth. They can't hear you otherwise. Can't hear you otherwise. Daniel Ortega, December 13th, 1987. Democracy, all right? December 13th, 1987 made the statement that even if the Sandinistas lost the election, they would hand over the government but never hand over the power.
Of course, they've said that all the time. They also installed in Nicaragua a police state. You've got to remember that in '79, the Nicaraguan people rose against a rightist dictatorship.
Go ahead.
They fought against that dictatorship, and in turn, we got saddled with an even worse dictatorship.
Introduce yourself, sir.
My name's Ralph McGehee. Worked for the CIA for 25 years. I'm an oppositionist to the CIA. Won the Career Intelligence Medal after leaving the agency, and the Honorable Service Medal, and a whole bunch of other awards from the CIA. The misstatement that I was talking about is you said a 600,000-man army. It's a militia. They're going to reduce their regular army and arm their people. Now, if they're going to arm the people, they obviously have the popular support of the people. You have your facts.
Why would
well,
they
may
need
I
a
ask you one
600,000
question? May I
militia
ask you
if
one
they
question?
have the support of the people? They don't have the support of the people, and that is the problem that they face.
Well, do you have the support of the people?
Yes.
Well,
How can you survive?
Do you have it, Mr. McGehee?
Excuse me.
Do you have the support of the people? Do you live in Nicaragua? Huh? He does. Why do you, if you're no longer with the CIA and you waited the 25 years to get your retirement before you turned into a turncoat, all right? Let me hear
Because
this.
I got my retirement, I don't have to write bad checks like you do.
That is because, sir, you have lived on the breast of the American people and sucked all the milk you could for 20...
And for that, sir, and for that, they awarded me, in observing my protest internally, they awarded me the Career Intelligence Medal. I didn't suck on anybody's breast. What I did...
You did when you turn against your own upbringing, all right? You turned against the upbringing you got in the CIA.
You're turning against your upbringing. We're talking about democracy.
I'm talking about democracy,
What you
too.
have in the Iran-Contragate affair is fascism. You see what the Iran-Contra report says. What was this
You are
mark
so
about?
full of it, sir, I can smell you.
I can
We're gonna talk.
let me
We're gonna talk to this CIA agent. Shut your face! Shut your face! You traitor! You traitor! You who traded on the United States! You traitor! You traitor! We're gonna talk to this former CIA agent, all right? I think he was once a hero, and he's gone on.
Why don't you keep him away from me?
Relax, relax. Relax, sir. Sir, relax, all right?
All right.
Relax.
Don't approach me with your finger pointed unless
Sir,
I can do the same thing.
You can do the same thing. We do it behind the stand, all right? That's the way we do it here.
All right, you get behind
All right.
the stand.
Sir, this is my show. You are not running the CIA now.
I never did.
You are not running it. You're not even a big wheel anymore.
Neither are you. I mean, you're playing to the
We'll be
audience.
back. We'll be back to talk to this slimeball traitor in a minute. Say, if you like me at 9, you'll love me at 11. If you hate me at 9, you'll still hate me at 11. Don't miss the special late night edition all next week. All right, joining us at home base, we've asked Mr. McGehee to join us here. Incidentally, let me give you a little background. He is the research director for the Association for Responsible Dissent. He worked as an agent with the CIA for 25 years. He's the author of Deadly Secrets. In the last 4 years with the CIA, I should say, he worked on the International Communism Branch. Mr. McGehee, you worked for 25 years for the agency. Much of that work was with international communism. What prompted you to end your career defending your country and begin a new career attacking?
Well, I feel I'm defending my country better now. Just as an example, there have been a number of studies conducted about, relevant to CIA covert operations. Under the Eisenhower presidency, his presidential board of consultants said that CIA covert operations are having a negative impact on the United States and are detracting substantially from its intelligence role.
Do you think there should be covert operations at times, though, in the CIA?
For the most part, no, because it, in all cases, slants its intelligence to support policy. In other words, the United States does not have an intelligence organization.
Does it ever supply information that's valuable?
It supplies policy-supportive information that's destructive, self-destructive. Now, the Senate Church Committee report that investigated the CIA said that in a 14-year period, the CIA conducted 900 major covert operations and thousands of lesser covert operations. And that covert operations have a momentum of their own, and that the effects of these are increasingly costly for America's interest and reputation. The National Security Advisor under Kennedy and Johnson, McGeorge Bundy, said the same thing. The
So
Pike
far,
Committee
you've
report.
named all ultra-left-wingers.
The Senate Church Committee report?
Are you kidding me? Church? Frank Church? He was so left he walked like this.
He was only one man. This I'm talking about the entire committee report. I see agency covert operations as very destructive for America's
Always.
interests. Yes, always.
How do we gather intelligence then?
We gather intelligence for the normal procedures, primarily through these satellites and the technical means. You get the vast majority of your intelligence, I would estimate probably 99%, from overt sources and from the technical intelligence collection operations.
All right. How do you oppose the administration's use of the CIA in Nicaragua simply to secure democracy and to seal our borders?
Do you believe that?
Yeah, I believe it very much.
We're
because
under danger?
here's what I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Palacio. I believe in this country of 3 million people, Nicaragua, 500,000 of them have already fled the country, all right? I believe that a good number of them are coming to the United States. I believe that if we aren't able to protect our borders, I believe that if all of Central America comes under the hammer and sickle, we're going to have problems like we can't imagine, not from them, but from the immigrants coming in.
Well, if you'll look at the number of immigrants, most are coming in from El Salvador and Guatemala, where we say they're so-called democracies. These are imposed military regimes that have been inculcated or created by the CIA. And most of the refugees coming into the United States are Salvadorans and Guatemalans. Very few Nicaraguans.
Now, let me go to some of our other folks here for just a second, all right? I want to talk to Peter Flaherty, who's chairman of Citizens for Reagan. Peter, let me ask you, as chairman of that organization, why do you think our commander-in-chief has made it a priority to fight for democracy in Nicaragua? Do you really believe that that is an obsession with him and that there's no danger?
Well, I believe it is an obsession. I believe it's a good obsession. It's my obsession. It's Ernesto's obsession, who came from Nicaragua and was driven out of his homeland. There's a national security threat to the United States. We talked about the big Soviet buildup. Ralph, you're a little behind the times. In 1984, there was an election in El Salvador. I was there. I saw poor campesinos standing in the sun for hours, 2 or 3 hours, 100-degree weather, waiting to vote. And you may be condescending to them. I think you're even racist when you suggest they're incapable of governing themselves.
I never said
and having
that.
a democratic
I never
system.
said that.
Now, in Guatemala, there was an election in 1985. I attended that one, too. There were 2 candidates. There was a free press. There was a vigorous discussion. And that's the future of Central America.
Did you attend
talk
the
about
election
immigrants
in El
from
Salvador?
I'm sorry?
Where Jesse Helms said the election was rigged by the CIA. Jesse Helms. He's not a right-wing, well, he is a right-wing, but he's not a leftist by any means. He said the CIA rigged the election. Now, the agency traditionally rigs elections around the world.
Did you rig elections when you were with the agency?
I was involved in creating propaganda that allowed for the rigging of elections.
More, let me just give you this anecdote. I was standing outside the polls in San Salvador, and I talked to a man who was a poll worker with the Christian Democrat Party, President Duarte's party. And he said to me, you know, this is really wonderful. The eyes of the world are on this election. The United States is going to guarantee that this is a clean and fair election. I stood outside the same polling place in 1972 when President Duarte was elected. He got a majority of the votes, but in the middle of the night, the generals stole the election after calling the U.S. Embassy. Those days are over. Since President Reagan has come in, there's been a record of success and democracy in Central America. And talking about immigration, you're right. There's lots of immigrants coming from El Salvador and Guatemala, just like Nicaragua. That's because there's political instability there.
There is no democracy in El Salvador.
There's instability, and that's because of the Soviet penetration of that region starting in 1979. 100 million people live between the Texas border and the southernmost border of Panama. If 10 to 20% of those people flee, as they always do when a communist regime comes to power, the United States is facing 10 to 20 million new immigrants.
Let me ask you a quick question before I go to Mr. Burns. Let me ask you a quick question. Under the Reagan administration, all right, and I don't credit Ronald Reagan with doing everything right either, all right? We all know that. But under the Reagan administration, how many countries have been saved for democracy and how many countries have gone communist versus what happened under the Carter administration? Under
President Reagan, not 1 inch of territory has been surrendered to the communists, and a small third world nation of Grenada, which has 500,000 citizens, has been liberated for freedom. And incidentally, Larry condemned the liberation of Grenada at the time.
Speaking about that Grenada, today there's a 50% unemployment rate, the highest drug addiction rate and alcoholism rate in the history of that island. The political structure is unraveling, and I think that Washington discovered that's a lot easier to destroy a political system than to create a new one. But what I really want to get at are these remarks about Guatemala and El Salvador. The day of the election, of the inauguration of the new president of Guatemala, Vinicius Cerezo, in the presidential palace, I was standing next to him, and he said to me, I don't have one loyal battalion in that military.
Then how come
Also, General Gramajo, the commander-in-chief of the Guatemalan army, described the civilian government of the Christian Democrats as a project of the military. In El Salvador, clearly, the Duarte government, which is suffering a massive fall of esteem due to corruption.
Which wasn't really our favorite candidate anyhow in this country.
Well, he was some of our favorite candidate. But anyway, in the Duarte is a function of the Salvadoran security forces who permit him to stay in office as long as he acts as a bagman, coming to Washington every year to get $500 million of U.S. aid. That's why 40 U.S. mayors yesterday protested Contra funding and said, as our cities are decaying and we have no money to provide food and housing for the homeless, we're giving several $billions a year to promote war in Central America.
Well,
Can I say something to
go
that?
ahead, Mr. Palacio. No, I want to hear from
Nobody
Mr.
ever
Palacio.
said that the fight for democracy was easy. But you sit there pontificating about what's going on in
No, I'm
Central
standing,
America.
Ernesto, you're sitting
pontificating.
pontificating.
You're not Central American. You don't know what's going on in Central America. I'm Central America. I live there. I know the Central American.
Right, and your predecessor,
the Central American
your
president,
predecessor holding your
Central
office,
American
hadn't been in Nicaragua for 17 years.
Said that Salvador is a democracy. They've gotten together to force Nicaragua, to force the Sandinistas to democratize, because that is the name of the game, democracy. It's a hard fight against extreme right and against extreme left. Sure it is, but the fight must be given.
This is a life and death issue, everybody, all right? Home and abroad. Next, we'll talk to a man who nearly sacrificed his life at home, all right, for what he believed in for the benefit of those abroad. Stay tuned. Not too many months ago, a man performed an act that many of us would say was stupid. Others among us would say this was a brave act. His name was Brian Wilson, and I don't mean of Little Surfer Girl either. His name was Brian Wilson, and he was the gentleman who lay down on the track to bring a halt to a munitions train. The munitions train did not stop. At home, I'd like you to look at your television monitors, and in our studio, I'd like you to view the television monitor for Mr. Wilson's decapitation. Would you watch this, please? The train advances, and Mr. Wilson is run over. His legs were severed. We have Mr. Wilson on the phone. Mr. Wilson, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
Was that a moment of temporary madness, or was that a premeditated act?
Well, I don't remember anything about the incident, but I think that we now know that the train was ordered to run and not to stop outside the Navy area.
In view of what happened to your legs, don't you feel that there's a more effective way to protest the U.S. policy towards Nicaragua?
Well, I didn't intend to lose my legs. I never envisioned the train not stopping. They had incredible amount of notice before we had our vigil on the tracks, and it never occurred to us that the train would not stop in a civilized society for citizens exercising their First Amendment right to dissent.
Was it a munitions train, Mr. Wilson?
Pardon me?
Was it a munitions train?
Yes, it was.
Was that munitions train, where was that munitions train proceeding to?
Well, that particular train was going to Port Chicago to be loaded on ships, and some of those ships go to Central America. Some also go to other parts in the Pacific.
Were they going to take arms to the Nicaraguans?
Many of the weapons that go into El Salvador wind up in Honduras and Nicaragua.
How do you know that, sir?
Because I spent a substantial amount of time with Mr. Hassenfuss, and he has described to me in detail the flight patterns from Ilopango to Aguacate over the territory of Nicaragua and the drop zones.
Mr. Hassenfuss, who, of course, flew for a CIA covert mission, is that correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Hassenfuss, who was not the command pilot of that plane, but I believe a pusher, am I correct, who pushed cargo out of the plane?
Correct. They call them kickers.
Kickers. And this is a man who knows where all the weapons are going.
Well, he indicated that to me.
All right, sir. Would you prefer that the U.S. turn communist and, I might add, become a country that would not allow you to display the type of heroism or stupidity you displayed?
I would like my country to abide by its own laws and international laws that it has agreed to abide by, and the World Court Order, which it also had agreed in advance when it signed the United Nations Charter to abide by, and we have sufficient procedures and processes for dealing with grievances.
United Nations Charter, which of course you will readily admit, sir, has done nothing.
Pardon me?
A United Nations Charter, which I'm sure you will readily admit has done nothing for the benefit of the United States.
Well, it ruled in our favor when we brought Iran before the World Court in 1980.
Let me turn to Mr. Wilson. Do you honestly support this type of extremism, Mr. Wilson?
Burns?
Yeah, Mr. Burns,
Right.
I'm sorry.
Well, I think that throughout this history of this country and other democracies, people of conscience have taken their stand. I mean, Martin Luther King constantly got himself arrested. You have to remember that the American Revolution was a minority movement, and that over 50,000 Americans fled to Canada because they were unhappy with the revolution.
Almost as many as fled to Canada during the Vietnam War.
Maybe so. But certainly, I mean, there are people supporting the right to life movement who chain themselves to fences and get themselves arrested. Civil disobedience is used by all sides and all occasions.
Do you support civil disobedience on the right as well as on the left?
That is, people who engage in acts of civil disobedience are violating the law and have to realize
pay the price.
That they face being arrested.
Or pay the price.
Certainly, you know, I would expect Genghis Khan to say that the locomotive must go on at all costs. It would be, that is, I was, as a student in England, I used to witness demonstrations before U.S. naval bases, Polaris submarine bases, where the bobbies would pick up protesters and gently move them away, and the process would go on.
As gently as they move them in Northern Ireland, sir?
I certainly don't approve of the way that they are moving them in Northern Ireland.
Why are they so civilized around the Polaris bases?
But I am not arguing for the civility of the bobby. What I'm saying is that there is a way of handling people engaging in civil disobedience.
It would seem to me that if you have a
them.
munitions train, all right, we don't know maybe all the answers of what type of munitions were on that train, and if indeed that train were stopped, could there have been additional activities which would have endangered people who were performing those activities?
I'm sure that the naval munitions yard was extremely well guarded, and that there was no security at all. There was no threat to the security or the integrity of that munitions shipment.
How do you know that if the train didn't stop?
Well, because I sort of read on the subject, and what I read was that the engineer was following instructions to go on no matter what the situation is. Now, I think the real culprit there is not so much the engineer, but the person who gave those instructions. I don't know whether you've been following the scandal that's been going on at West Point right now. There's a real Hitlerite type up there who is pushing out some of the best students of the academy because they refuse to go through with the ridiculous process of vicious hazing of younger members of the academy. You know, there's a way this country has had a tradition.
How long has that
decency
hazing been going on, Mr. Burns?
For a long time.
Since the
that doesn't mean
since the academy came into effect.
That's right. And as a college
has
professor
that academy
for 15 years,
has that academy turned out any heroes? Was Eisenhower, Patton, Douglas MacArthur, were they heroes?
It probably has turned out a number of people who are
So why is
anti-heroes.
this particular commandant, a Hitlerian
well,
type commandant?
because it's a different era. And it's a different era for all aspects of this society. And there are people in senior positions at West Point who realize that this drill captain is a fanatic and is a danger to the institution. Now, what I'm really...
Then he should be replaced.
Yeah, what I'm suggesting here is that, you know, every civil society has problems and difficulties. And there are various ways of addressing these. Some through dialogue, some through acts of civil disobedience when principle is at stake, on either side. That is, those who are right to life.
Do you believe in democracy?
I certainly do, as much as you do.
If you believe in democracy, then don't you understand that better than 57%, and not done incidentally by a conservative group, better than 57% of the people in the United States support the Contras?
Where did you read that poll?
Mr. Flaherty, where did I read that? Do you know? Because your figures say 80%. I'll tell you, why don't you try Newsweek magazine?
No, I won't. I'll try a different one. I'll try Walter Mondale's pollster, the firm of Penn and Schoen. They conducted a public opinion poll recently, and it shows that the public favors aid to the resistance by a margin of 43 to 41, fairly evenly divided. Listen, let me finish. This is a drastic change from last year at this time when the public was against the aid by a margin of 2 to 1. What really made the difference was the hearings this summer. Last year, a majority of Americans, despite this controversial issue, could not correctly identify which side we were even on there. Now, 70% can correctly identify that we support the resistance, and only 5% say we support the Sandinistas.
So, Washington Post ABC poll that was taken in 1984 that said 6 to 1
the American people were opposed to Contra
That's
aid.
true.
Well,
That's
84
true in
was 4 years ago.
1984.
Things have
That's
changed.
true in 1984.
And it's
This is
probably more true right
1988,
now.
Mr. McGee.
This is probably more true right
Get with
now.
time. Get with the time. Get with the time. All right? We've been talking about Mr. Wilson and what's going on south of the border. Next, we're going to change direction and talk about a guy I think is one hell of an American hero. I know I'll have agreement from Mr. McGee and Mr. Burns. Oliver North. Welcome back, everybody. Now we're joined on our home base by Ralph McGehee, and of course we've got Mr. Burns with us, and we have Mr. Palacio with us. Let me ask Mr. McGehee. In my opinion, I got to tell you, the Iran-Contra hearings gave the American people the chance to see Oliver North for what he really is. How can you say that he's anything other than a bona fide hero?
Yeah. Well, I at one point considered myself to be an Ollie North early in my career, and look at the conclusions. Look at the conclusions of the Iran-Contra report. It said that the entire Iran-Contra affair was marked by secrecy, deception, and disdain for the law. And Ollie North went up there and admitted he lied to Congress.
The law, of course, being the Boland Amendment.
No, well, the law of the United States and the various treaties that we have signed and the various internal regulations that we have against what we're doing in Nicaragua. So it was a violation not only of the oversight of the Congress, who they were lying to. Another thing that the Iran-Contra report said is that Congress was told very little about this, and what they were told were lies. And it just goes, there were violations.
Oliver North said that himself.
There were violations of the Constitution, and there were gross violations of the law. Now, this
what were the
report says
violations of the Constitution? Why don't you enumerate one?
I don't know them. That's listed in the report. The report. Well, read the report. Don't believe me. Go read the report. It says right in there are violations of the Constitution and misdemeanors and felonies committed by these people. And I feel, as I said, I felt at one time just like Ollie North felt, that anything you do to fight the communist horde is justifiable.
You don't feel that way any longer.
I feel what you have to do is protect the interests of the American people by appreciating reality. And by listening
Who decides what the interests of the American people are? 435 castrated representatives in Washington, D.C., or the American people?
Stuttered talk so now.
Yeah, or one Ollie North. Now, is he a Marine lieutenant colonel who, in the Pentagon thing, is, you know, he's like a paper pusher, or goes out and gets supplies. He has no real authority, yet he was
he given authority?
That's nonsense.
Was he given authority? Go ahead, Mr. Flaherty.
Ollie North was a political military advisor at the National Security Council. It's a very important post. He was doing his job. You talk about violations of the law. I'd like to know what they were. Private aid to the resistance was legal. The president encouraged Americans to give as much as they could.
What about the Boland Amendment?
The Boland Amendment applied to public funds. No public funds were sent.
Third party.
What are the
donations from third countries were legal. The Congress of the United States does not have the right.
To the CIA that were sold to Iran, and that money was used to buy weapons to send to the Contras. A complete violation of congressional oversight, of the laws of this country, a violation of international law.
Well, some folks think differently, but I find it very hypocritical that the Congress is now considering voting more aid to the resistance when there'd be no resistance to vote aid to if Ollie North hadn't helped to keep them alive when the Congress turned off the aid.
Let's give Mr. Burns a chance to decide what kind of reward you and your left-leaning side would give Oliver North and Poindexter.
Well, it's not just me, Mort. It's also the sensitive audience that I brought with me, who are overwhelmingly support my position. I want you to know that.
Let me hear the folks who support Mr. Burns.
Yay! Yeah, there they are.
Let me hear from the folks who support Oliver North. It is, after all, Mr. Burns, a democracy. That's what you wanted.
That's true, Morton.
And the democracy,
this is a representative body of American
has
citizens.
sent you.
On Ollie North,
You're damn right they are. Don't you make fun of that audience,
I'm not
pal.
making fun of at all of the audience. But I do have an insight into Berks's. Get him, Mort? Okay, let's talk about Ollie North. Ollie North, to me, and I knew about Ollie North long before he hit the pages, because we were getting reports that the NSC had been turned into, which it never was supposed to be, in terms of the 1946 legislation, supposed to be an advisory body to the president, turned into a deep, covert, operational function, which it was never meant to be, with no oversight, no control, so forth. Ollie North, Admiral Poindexter, would have the characterological profile. Believe me, there are Ollie Norths and Poindexters in the Soviet Union and in every one of those eastern police states.
You find any comfort in anything Oliver North did?
People who feel they know more, they know better what's good for the country than the representatives and the blah, blah, blah. Meaning,
why do you say blah, blah, blah? Why can't you say people?
Are you describing...
No, I'm talking about various institutions.
Do you find comfort in anything Oliver North did?
No.
Nothing.
No.
You find...
No.
Let me ask. Here is a great American who finds no comfort in the fact that Oliver North was the one who planned and executed, all right, the capture of the Iranians who were flying to Italy. You remember that?
Yes, I do.
You found no comfort in that?
I also find no comfort in the fact that in terms of the Libyan bombing raid, Oliver North, standing before all of those cameras, said that congressmen had leaked information that had endangered American lives.
Yes.
And
Yes,
it later turned out it was North who leaked the information.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
No, it wasn't.
He leaked that information.
North leaked that information to a congressman who leaked the information.
No, he leaked it to the media. No, sir.
It was North who directly leaked it to the media. That's why you no longer heard about that information. And of course,
were you uncomfortable with the bombing of Libya, too?
No, but afterwards, we just discovered a couple of weeks ago that the reason why we bombed Libya was to retaliate for the, mind you, Libya is no great hero nation for me. But what I'm worried about is the lawlessness of this country. That is, this country, in the last 7 years, under this miserable administration, has given up.
We were much better off having some bubble-headed idiot drinking Billy beer, I suppose. Next, we'll go to the people who will determine the fate of democracy. Our audience out there, join us. Say, if you like me at 9, you'll love me at 11. If you hate me at 9, you'll still hate me at 11. Don't miss the special late-night edition, all next week. Mr. Palacio, let me go to you first. You're the only one of us here who's lived his life in Nicaragua and knows what's going on. Any comments on what you've heard tonight so far from our learned professorial types?
Well, I respect their right to what they're saying.
And
I don't agree
you fight for it, right?
with what they're saying. That's what we're fighting for in my country. What they say here, their ability to criticize this government, for that, they would probably be thrown into jail in Nicaragua or sent to a psychiatric treatment center.
All right, let me ask this young man. How do you feel from what you've heard tonight?
Well, Lord, I'm ashamed of you, actually, because
That's got it pumping, baby.
You and this liberal audience, I watch Phil Donahue, and at least he gives...
Everyone has to be someplace, all right?
You got a meeting out of your hand, Mort, because at least he gives both sides of the issue. You're totally biased. You get them against these men that understand what's going on. And we should cut off aid to the Contras and start a diplomatic process.
Turn it over to the commies.
No,
Turn it over to the commies.
Diplomatic process.
You don't start a diplomatic process with your hands tied behind your back, sonny boy. Grow up. Rub the snot off your nose. Grow up.
Because unlike Miguel de Escoto, the Sandinista foreign minister, I was born in Nicaragua because I love Nicaragua, because I care about Nicaragua, because I am proud to be a Nicaraguan. I back the Nicaraguan democratic resistance in the same way in which the French patriots backed and supported the forces of resistance who fought against the Nazi occupation of France. Many things have been said here. Many figures, especially this gentleman, liberals, leftists, whatever, I don't know what difference there is, all right, have used figures. Okay, I also have a few figures. And I know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about my country, all right? In 1987, the Soviet Union sent to Nicaragua 20,700 metric tons of weapons, of military equipment, included in it 7 helicopters, 30 armored personnel carriers, 2 Zug patrol boats, big amounts of light weapons and ammunition. These came in 62 shipments, 25 of them on Soviet vessels, 17 on Cuban vessels, and the rest in Bulgarian, East German, and Nicaraguan vessels.
To be fair, sir, how many metric tons of weapons came from the United States? Be fair.
I have no idea about that.
Well, let me tell you, in the last year...
But in terms of money,
in the last year, Soviet military aid has been 10 times more than American military aid.
In terms of money, there is a conservative estimate by the State Department, very conservative, that the value of this aid, not to the so-called Sandinistas, let us call them by the name, to the communists, is of $450 million. This is a very, very conservative estimate. I know you gentlemen might be questioned and might be wondering which my credentials are to things like this. All right? I am going to show you that I know better than you what's going on in my country, and that my credentials to speak about Nicaragua are better than yours.
No, that's not right. That's not right.
Sandino would be a Contra.
Get away, go.
You are just
That is how desperate people can become when they want peace, when he wants his country back. Give Nicaragua back to the Nicaraguans. We'll be back in just a second. Hey, if you like me at 9, you'll love me at 11. If you hate me at 9, you'll still hate me at 11. Don't miss the special late night edition, all next week. All right, we're back again, and we're going to wrap it up with some statements. I want to say that I understand one of my pablum-puking producers took an American flag away from some of these people, all right? Good. But I just want to say I'd like Mr. McGehee to see if he can come to a conclusion tonight that would help all of us join together.
The agency's operations, covert operations, which the war in Nicaragua is, have been completely destructive of America's own interests. The one example, the Vietnam War, was a CIA-generated war that cost the American people $600 billion in the death of 58,000 people. This sort of activity is going on now in Nicaragua. We talk about the strengths that the Soviet weaponry coming in. A CIA intelligence, or a number of CIA intelligence reports, indicates that the Honduran military is much stronger than the Sandinista military, that the Salvadoran military is much stronger.
All right, all right, that's good propaganda. You never stop learning your propaganda.
No,
he never told you when we pulled out of Vietnam, the commies killed 3 million Cambodians, but screw them, they're only slant eyes, right? They're only slant eyes, right?
That's what we're supporting in Cambodia.
Mr. Flaherty, where's Mr. Flaherty?
No, I'm trying to make a point.
You made a minute point. You've been making them for years.
Right, thank you.
Mr. Flaherty.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, McGehee, you're the same guy who, when 007 was shot down by the Soviets, claimed it was on an espionage mission.
Yes, I since retracted that.
Oh, well, good, good. Well, anyways, Mort, we live in a dangerous neighborhood.
And he'll
now, the
probably
Western
retract
Hemisphere.
some of these statements tonight.
No, never.
Western Hemisphere is a dangerous place now, and my organization, Citizens for Reagan, has put out something, hopefully, that'll make it safer. It's an Ortega.
Oh, is that the want ad? Is that the want ad on Ortega
That's
that
right.
shows he robbed banks when he was a teenager?
That's correct. He robbed a bank in democratic Costa Rica. An unarmed bank guard was killed. He pleaded for his wife, but Ortega killed him anyways. And these are the kind of folks we're dealing with.
I want to give Mr. McGehee one of my checks. Mr. McGehee, you're so concerned about my bouncing checks. There's one for you, sir, all right? All right. Mr. Burns wants one, too. You know, I'm tired of playing let's make a deal with the commies. Now it's my turn to make a deal, all right? Anyone who's against giving aid to the Contras wins a one-way ticket to the communist country of his choice, and you can rot in hell for as long as your life lives. Long live democracy!